Hiking the Appalachian Trail end to end was to be my sabbatical this year. Something about escaping stressful city life was endlessly appealing to me when I cooked up the idea one frosty January morning. Anything to get me away from endless traffic, pointless meetings, and the omnipresent rush that one feels in day-to-day life that never allows you to sit down and enjoy the moment. Of course, I realized hiking the trail was never going to be a stress-free experience, but I've been camping in various places in the U.S. every summer, so the idea didn't seem too far-fetched. Throughout winter and spring, I collected all the gear I'd need, studied maps of the area, and read several blogs from those who succeeded on the trail and those who didn't. Sadly, I have to report that I belong to those that never finished the trail, though it isn't for the usual reasons: fatigue, boredom, inexperience, but rather due to a nightmarish encounter that left me wishing that the only bad thing that could happen on the trail was failing to light a fire or getting caught pissing on a tree. This is my recollection of those events that I hope will serve as a warning for anyone who is as naive as I was back then. Now, my first 2 weeks on the trail were actually amazing. Not to get all hippy-dippy, but I think the fresh air and daily physical exercise healed the tiny ball of stress that had been steadily growing in my chest since the beginning of the year. Every day was a challenge, but unlike life in the city, it was manageable. Simple even. Completing daily tasks like building a fire, setting up camp, and reaching the next peak with a new vista made me feel a little more confident in myself each day. Besides the wonderful nature and feelings of accomplishment, the people I met on the trail during those weeks were also incredible. It was so different from the competitive, fearful people I had met throughout my life and whom I feared I would become. It made me realize just how lonely I had become in the city because I could never connect with anyone there. But on the trail, everyone was giving and kind, and not just with material goods. Knowledge and stories were just as appreciated as food and water. I even spent time with people on the trail who I would normally avoid in the city, but out here I managed to find them rather goofy and charming in their own way. There was this one group of rednecks in particular that stood out. I remembered that they stayed up all night talking about hating all aspects of modern culture and those who championed them. They had this funny ritual of contriving a situation in which one of these modern culturalists would try to convert them to their side, and the rednecks would always scream, "Youpee yee, not for me," at the end of the story, and laugh uncontrollably while mimicking firing guns with their hands. I really thought that group was the worst I would run into out here, but I was horribly wrong. One night, I decided to make camp at the peak of a small mountain when I spotted a particularly distant campfire in the valley below. It looked like it would take a mile or two to reach them, and I was debating if it was worth the pain of walking off trail, but my curiosity got the best of me. I hadn't seen or talked to any fellow travelers in a week, and something intrigued me about this group. Why were they so far off trail? Were they lost? Who knows? Maybe I could even be a hero instead of just a lonely camper if I found their site. With my head drowning in a sea of possibilities, I set off to find their camp armed with nothing but a flashlight and a grin on my face. It took much longer to descend into the valley than anticipated. Walking downhill is much harder on the legs than uphill when you're tired. There were many times during the night when I felt that my calves were burning hotter than any campfire I'd made on the trail. I almost decided to turn back. Almost. if it weren't for a peculiar sound echoing through the mountain forest. I inched myself ever closer until the sound became clearer. Thump, wump, thump. The rhythmic beating of a drum. The more I listened, the less my body ached. Entranced, I started to march towards the origin of the drumming. Thump, wump, thump, wump. The campsite was getting closer. I was about 30 feet away now. Large bushes obscured most of the sight, but standing tall I could see what looked like a bipedal goat. Thump, wump, thump, wump, thump, wump, thump, hootha-wah. A moment of silence. I took not another step. The man-goat reared its head back, moonlight shimmering off the black mane that draped its tensing throat. The goat's head opened to birth a beastly howl. The drums began beating again after being spurred by the beastly roar. Thump, whump, thump, whump. I used the sound of the drums to cover my footsteps as I moved closer still. I wasn't entirely sure what was going on, but whatever it was would make an exciting as hell story back home. With a closer view, the goat creature was clearly just a shirtless man with a goat mask. Great, I thought. I've stumbled into a satanic cult in the middle of absolutely nowhere. I've heard my fair share of stories about the kooky people who walk the Appalachian Trail, but nothing about a group of devil worshippers doing God's knows what in the woods. Looking down, I could see around 8-10 people prostrate on the ground, bowing to their goatly leader. It was hard to tell with only the campfire's light, but it looked like all the members might have been wearing masks too. One member caught my eye in particular. This member wasn't praying with the rest. They were tied to a tree off to the side of the congregation, just at the edge of the fire's light. They were wiggling. It looked awfully uncomfortable. They donned what looked like a horse's mask on their head, but it was difficult to tell due to the dancing shadows. As I was looking, the goatman raised their hand, and the chanting quieted to a murmur, and then to a full stop. The goat reached behind him and brought out an object wrapped in a black cloak. The way the cloak wrapped around the object suggested that it was a spherical, head-sized object. The congregation bowed their heads as the goat-masked man spoke. Look upon me, adjacent children of the God beings, and hear my sermon. Humans were given a natural place in this order, next to the gods themselves, as were ferrets, foxes, horses, hippos, and so forth. But only to us have the gods given the miracle of language to decipher the holy order. Several members of the makeshift camp congregation nodded their heads and hummed in agreement. The goat pastor's voice was eloquent. It seemed rather out of place, given the surroundings. Tonight, we celebrate this fortune bestowed upon us by beholding one of the God's most holy creatures, a holy creature that was liberated from the more traitorous of our species. A member of the congregation closest to the priest stood up. They were wearing what appeared to be a gorilla mask, though, unlike the goatman's mask, this one seemed more makeshift, as if they had hastily printed a gorilla's face on a sack of cloth. The clumsily cut eye holes too high on the mask, so through the shimmer of the fire you could see the reflection of a human's eyes resting on top of another pair of dark gorilla eyes. "Lessee here, take a look at this," aped the gorilla-masked man. He somewhat clumsily grabbed the cloth covering the object on the stool. With a quick yank, he pulled off the cloth to reveal a goldfish. It took a moment to sink in. A goldfish, sitting in a goldfish bowl. The members of the congregation oohed and ahed at the sight of the golden-scaled spectacle. As for me, I simply couldn't hold in it. I let rip one of the deepest belly laughs of my lifetime. I was in complete hysteria. If only I had a hyena mask to complete the occasion. A giraffe-masked member yelled something unintelligible and pointed in my direction. "You out now!" screamed the gorilla-masked man. Holding my belly and gasping for air between chuckles, I came out of the woodworks and faced the crowd. "Hi, my name's Drew. Sorry for listening in. I couldn't even finish my sentence before the gorilla smashed his fist into my stomach. I fell to my knees. I'm... It was difficult to get my words out between breaths. "I'm just hiking the trail, too. I don't mean you any harm." Then I heard a cackle behind me. It came from a giraffe man. "Look, boys," he said, "we have another curious cat ready to join our flock." The congregation began jeering, hooting, and hollering. "I hope we get another zebra." I overheard someone yell in the commotion. "Another demonstration of what happens to traitors." The giraffe pointed towards the tied-up man with a horse mask. Only, now that I was closer, it was obvious that it was a zebra rather than a horse mask, though the zebra's white stripes had turned brownish red from bloody abuse. As I stared at him, a rock whizzed by my ear and landed squarely on the zebra man's head. I shudder at the sound it made upon contact, like a boot being driven into a pile of fleshy mud. The crowd erupted into applause before the rock even landed back on the ground. Cheered on by the crowd, one member of the congregation with a cat mask waltzed over and gave him a playful knock to the head right where the rock had landed before. The zebra let out an acute squeal, but then quickly resigned his anguish and remained still. "Enough," spoke the goat man. All went into obedient silence. "Interloper, you have but two choices. Join us in our worship, or sacrifice your life in service of our worship." With that decree, the gorilla grabbed my arms and restrained me. I twisted my whole body in an attempt to escape, but his grasp was much too strong. What was I to do? I couldn't imagine what would happen if I was sacrificed. To die out here of all places? I'll join," I muttered painfully. The goat man and his congregation all hummed with pleasure and agreement. "Tomorrow," began the goat man, "we begin the choosing. Tonight, let us continue our worship and rest." He then turned around and faded into the dark of the forest. My gorilla captor forcefully dragged me from the campfire's light and into a cage sitting under the shadow of the trees. If only I had approached the camp from this direction, maybe I would have wised up after seeing the cage and backed the hell out of this stupid idea. "Wait now, you join me tomorrow," said the gorilla-masked figure. With a final clang of the cage's door, I was left all alone for the night. The rest of the cult's members independently left the camp and disappeared throughout the night. As the fire's illumination faded, the last thing I could see was the broken man with the bloodied zebra's head. I had no idea if they were dead or alive. Their body lay still until the flame was no more. Hours passed, and after what felt like an eternity, I did eventually get some sleep, though I might have simply passed out. When I awoke, the sun had just peeped up from the horizon and illuminated a small gathering in front of my cage. The goat priest, the ape, the cat-masked member, and a man I hadn't seen before with a live ferret resting around his neck. Their zebra prisoner was in the same place as the night before, only his body was sitting stiffer now. "Ah, my little catch," came the familiar voice of the gorilla. "You got some choosing to do." He glared at me with all four eyes. "Hey," hooted the others. "Grab your paper and wait for the chief to give a first sermon," said the gorilla, motioning me and the goat man. I did as I was told and slid my arm through the cage's bars to grab a piece of paper from the bowl. I didn't dare make another move. "Hear ye, little human," began the goat priest in his reverent tone. "Listen to our gospel. The sacred gods have bestowed upon us a hierarchy of beings encrypted by our own alphabet. The beings closest to the gods are graced with names closest to the word God. Those beings understand the secrets of the universe in ways that all the outside named cannot understand." I was failing to understand. I knew that cults had wacky beliefs, but what was this guy actually saying? "In our fortune, humans have been placed adjacent to the god beings, one of which you witnessed last night." The goldfish?" I sputtered. "Shut up and listen," yelled Gorilla. "Unfold that paper," continued the goat man, "and find your place within the humans. And remember, treat all beings with proper regard within the holy hierarchy." With that, the goat man turned and majestically strode back into the forest. "Sorry, I don't understand." Tears were beginning to well up in my eyes. The ferret and cat snickered. "Looky," spoke the cat in a feminine tone. "You're a human sweetie, with an H. It's all encrypted in the holy alphabet. We're right next to, like, the gods, G." Slowly I began to realize more of their belief system, but I refused to believe that they actually thought like this. S is for stupid, I thought, but I dared not say that out loud. So the closer you are to the letter G, the more holy you are?" The cat simply replied with a duh gesture. I looked at the paper in my hand. Please not zebra. Anything but zebra, or yak, or walrus. I started to unfold the paper, but the cat swiped it out of my hands. "So slow. Let's see what you are, honey." I really hated her voice. It had this insufferable valley girl ring to it. She unfolded the paper and held her breath in mock anticipation. "Doggy," she finally squealed. "You get to be our nice little doggy, aw." My shoulders relaxed and my breathing became more even. Dog, D. At least I wasn't that far away from G. "Dogs are the true servants of mankind," said the ferret cultist. His voice was oddly soothing. "You won't really be a human among us, but you can certainly serve your masters well." He began to stroke his ferret pensively. "And for your first task, you can help us rummage up some food." "Hunting party," yelled the gorilla leader, who immediately rushed over to a box in the campsite. From the box, he brandished a shotgun whose cold steel shimmered in the morning's light. "Now be a good doggy and come," piped the cat. She unlocked the cage and I shambled out. As I began to wearily rise on my feet, I saw her arms snake towards me, and then I felt a sharp, stinging pain in my right leg. "All fours, doggy," she commanded. A small pocket knife was clasped in her hands. A smear of precious human ruby decorated the blade. Damn it, you stabbed me! Down! I shrank down to all fours. I'd never been so degraded, not even in middle school. Having my arms to support my body weight did take some of the pain off of my leg, at least. "Aye, mutt, you're gonna help us find some grub," grunted the gorilla. "Felicia, you come with us. Daryl, you can go on back to the rest." The man with the ferret pet walked off into the woods. Felicia and the gorilla started walking a different direction and beckoned me to join them, but I remained and looked at them perplexed. "Your job is to tell me where and what to shoot, and I'ma shoot it," explained the gorilla. "I guess it really would be hard to hunt with those masks on." "Okay," I muttered, unable to put up any resistance. I needed to find a way to escape these freaks somehow. I had strayed far, far away from the main trail, but as long as I continued to walk uphill, I should be able to find my way back up the mountain I came down from. I turned and hobbled in a direction that led uphill, acting as if I had smelled the scent of prey. After half an hour had passed, I could tell that my captors were getting impatient. So far, we'd been making some progress in a direction that I hoped would lead us to the trail, but I'd forgotten to actually look for something to hunt. "You're shite for a dog," grumbled Clark the gorilla, whose name I learned through idle chatter between him and Felicia. What could I hunt for realistically? I wasn't much of a hunter myself, but even I knew that dogs were common to take along for duck hunting, so maybe a duck would work? No, ducks wouldn't work at all. D is too close to G. I wouldn't hunt a dog, and I'm supposed to treat all creatures in the same tier with equal respect. Deer? Also, no. Wolves, maybe? But did those even exist in the Smokies? Felicia made an audible click with her mouth as I pondered. Jesus Christ, find something already idiot. Her voice had only gotten more grating the longer the hunt went on. "Shut up, cat," I replied. "Aren't you below me anyway? Why aren't you the one doing the hunting?" I winced immediately after my outcry, but rather than giving me another slash of her blade, she just snorted and cackled to Clark. "I'm a feline, stupid. I sighed internally. What was I expecting trying to reason with insane cultist idiots? Then for a brief moment, I saw it. The perfect prey. Skirting between two trees was the blurry outline of a rabbit. This one would be safe. I wasn't sure how far away from G an animal had to be to go from friend to food, but surely R was far enough. I pounded my fist into the ground and the rabbit leapt from behind the tree and into a short bush. I pointed my body towards the bush. Rabbit," I barked. Clark raised the shotgun towards the bush and tried to aim the best he could from behind his discount mask facade. Bang! Birds scattered out of nearby trees. The bush rustled, then nothing. "Fetch," grunted Clark. I dutifully bounded toward the bush, and inside I saw the carcass of the rabbit riddled with little holes from the shotgun. Instinctively, I began to reach for the rabbit with my mouth, but snapped out of it before my teeth sank into its flesh, opting to grab the bloody mess with my hands instead. Even though the rabbit was quickly turning cold, I could still feel the poor thing twitching. I turned around and presented the corpse prize to my masters. Instead of praise, I was met with dead silence. Both of them stared at me dead behind those masks. Felicia placed her right hand over her heart. Clark put his hand back on the trigger. I looked down at my quarry and felt a lump in my stomach. I had made such a careless mistake. This wasn't a rabbit. It was clearly a hare. "Aight, that's the last hunt you'll have, dog." Clark raised the gun at me, his finger moments away from pulling the trigger. Instantly, I turned and ran. As I passed a tree, I heard a bang from the gun and the crack of the tree's bark being ripped bare by the bullets. Up, up, up. I just had to run up and away to the safety of the trail. I only lasted about a minute before my legs began to cramp. Weeks of hiking, poor rest, and last but not least the wound in my leg were all taking their toll. The other two were still in hot pursuit, so I had no choice but to push my body further. I used my arms to bounce off of trees to keep myself moving forward as my legs tired out. Clark would fire around every so often, all of which missed to my great fortune. Guess he really did need a hunting dog to hit anything. Eventually, I found myself in dense brush, dense enough to hide and catch my breath. My leg was starting to bleed pretty badly, but I had no time to concern myself. I needed to find my way back to the main trail. I knew that I hadn't gone in the direction I had initially approached the camp from, but I knew I could find other hikers as long as I went up. In the brush, I caught a glimpse of my pursuers as they looked for me. Clark was disarmed, likely abandoning his gun after running out of ammo, while Felicia still held her blood-soaked blade. Even though I couldn't see her face, I could tell that she was relishing in this new hunt. I tried to control and conceal my breathing, but every so often I winced in pain from my leg. Sooner or later, they were going to find me. I just needed to make one final push, but where? After a few more agonizing moments, I heard something familiar in the distance. It sounded like a group of people engaging in the kind of jovial banter that a group of close friends might have. As the voices drew closer, I realized why it sounded so familiar. I had heard these voices laughing and telling the same stories to one another before. It was those anti-cultural rednecks. How glad I was to hear them again. Clark and Felicia could hear them as well, and looked at one another awkwardly, deciding what to do next. I knew this was my chance, and now it was time to take the initiative. With newfound energy, I gathered strength in my legs for one final push. Bursting out of the bushes, I overheard surprised grunts from the cult crew. "Get that damn dog!" I gave them no heed and continued my sprint. Closer, closer, just a few more yards until I reached the other hikers. The tree foliage was getting thinner. The footsteps of my pursuers, louder. My heart was pounding, my legs burning and bleeding until, finally, I exited the forest thicket and landed hard on the open trail. I lay in front of the redneck gang. Are you ate, buddy?" said one of the gang. Shortly thereafter, Felicia and Clark bounded out of the woods. Tense moments of silence followed, with the cultists and rednecks engaging in a confused standoff. I stood to my feet and gathered all of my breath for one last shout. "Furries!" I screamed, to shatter the silence. The rednecks looked at my pursuers, and the biggest one grinned. "Yippee-yee! Not for me!" The group of rednecks charged fiercely at Felicia and Clark, but I could not join them. My chest felt incredibly heavy, and I sank into the earth. As my vision faded, the last thing I saw was Felicia getting decked by the big one. Weakly, I muttered my final retort. "And I'm not a dog, I'm a hound." I awoke to the care of an airborne emergency rescue team. On the helicopter ride to the hospital, I got a good glimpse of the valley I had escaped. It seemed so strange to hover above the trees safe and sound, while knowing what kind of freakish hell lay in wait below me. I pondered for a while. How big was their group? How many people had they taken? But it didn't matter in the end. I was free. After my stay in the hospital, I rejoined the redneck gang to hear what happened after I passed out. Apparently, they managed to chase Clark and Felicia back into the woods, though they were not able to find any more of their group. We then went together to the police to file an official report. To our dissatisfaction, the police did not offer much assistance. I don't think they even believed my story, despite all the witnesses. Truth be told, I was beginning to doubt myself too. Who would believe that such a ridiculous cult would be active in this day and age? But I will always have the scar on my leg to remind myself that it was true, no matter what anyone else thought. So here I am, months later, writing this, on a cold January evening at home in the busy city. It's been hard to sleep knowing that they're still out there, and the police will do nothing to prevent them from attacking again. I'm posting this in as many places as I can to warn anyone willing to listen. If you should see a goat man wandering around the woods, run.